Good afternoon. It is 12:02 Mountain Time, so we'll begin since this is a short mini webinar. Today we're pleased to present our first ever mini webinar. It'll be a 30-minute webinar packed with information to assist you in preparing for your discussion with a funder. My name's Stephanie Cote. I'm Communications Manager at First Nations Oista Corporation. Please contact me with any of your communication needs, or if there's a specific topic you would be interested in seeing in our webinar series. I'm happy to hear from you. First, I'd like to test out our chat box feature, or the Q&A feature. If everyone could type in what organization you're representing today, that would be great. So today it looks like we have representation from Black Hills, Seneca, and from a few other organizations across the nation. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please feel free to use this feature and we'll address your questions accordingly. So First Nations Oista Corporation was created 15 years ago to address the lack of capital and financial infrastructure holding back economic development in Native communities, recognized by its parent company, First Nations Development Institute. Oista is the only existing Native CDFI intermediary offering financial products and development services exclusively to Native CDFIs and Native communities. Specifically, Oista provides training, technical assistance, investments, research, and policy advocacy to help Native communities develop an integral range of asset-building products and services, including financial education and financial products. Oista offers expert training from committed professionals who have extensive experience in Native economic development. Our training and technical assistance consists of several programs that not only help participants assess how starting a Native CDFI can benefit their communities, but also takes them step by step through the process of establishing one of these proven and innovative financial institutions. For more information on our programs department, please contact Crystal Langholtz at crystal@oista.org. Does your organization need lending capital? Oista offers loan applications on a rolling basis. Our products range from startup loans for emerging loan funds to capital loans for established CDFIs. Application requirements include current and historical financial statements, portfolio reports, loan policies, current historical financial statements, and a comprehensive business plan or comparable information. For more information on our loan products, please contact Emily Trump at emily@oista.org. Preparing for your discussion with a funder, this 30-minute webinar we are going to briefly discuss the development of your elevator pitch, hear from former executive directors from the Native CDFI field, and have a brief Q&A session. If you're joining us for the Funder Speed Dating session at this year's OFN conference in Detroit, or run into someone in an elevator, you might be thinking, I only have 1 minute with a funder. What do I say? The first thing to consider in developing your elevator pitch is that in order to come across fluid and captivating, you must tell a story. If you were raised like me, you'd be good at this, having plenty of examples from your aunties and uncles sitting around the table or a campfire on a Friday night, telling you countless stories of old. Some you've heard so many times, yet you listen for the 5th, 15th, or even 50th time because they are so captivating. But just remember, you only have 1 minute. Luckily for you, we will give you a few more minutes at the Funder Speed Dating session. So what do I talk about? Where do I begin? In developing your story, there are certain pieces to implement into your speech. First is to start out with describing your project. For me, this sounds like Hi, my name's Stephanie. I work at First Nations Owista Corporation as Communications Manager. We are a national Native community development financial institution intermediary, providing lending capital and technical assistance to Native loan funds, increasing the economic capacity of Native communities across the nation. In practicing this with my family, the question I always get is, what is a CDFI? So I have to implement this into my speech. A community development financial institution is a private financial institution that is 100% dedicated to delivering responsible, affordable lending to help low-income, low-wealth, and other disadvantaged peoples and communities. As an intermediary institution, we provide initial startup capital to the Native Loan Fund in conjunction with technical assistance services to ensure the sustainability within tribal communities. Of course, you can use resources such as the World Wide Web to assist you in developing this part of your speech. The next piece in developing your story structure is the big picture problem. So you would ask yourself, what is my organization, or why is my organization providing these services? For my organization, the big picture question would be, why do we need Native CDFIs in tribal communities, or how are we building Native economies? The next piece of my speech would sound like, during colonization, Native nations were forced onto reservation lands, often desolate, remote locations in the United States. The communities were forced to live in these locations, incorporating a new economic structure into their community without any resources or funding to develop a solid foundation for a thriving economy. The next piece would be the solution, which is where your organization comes into play. So for mine, I'd say Native loan funds provide capital to small businesses and housing opportunities on reservations and in surrounding communities. By developing businesses and providing housing, the Native communities are able to cultivate economies that do not leak into outside communities, and the funding stays within the borders of the community. Next, you would add statistics about your organization. For me, I would gather lending data, financial education statistics. In this section, you might also include anecdotal past experiences, but remember to keep it short and relevant to the story you're telling. Last but not least, in developing your story, finish with an ask. If you know how you'd like the funding agency to assist you, you can be specific on what they're funding or if you need their collaboration on a specific project. If you're asking for general funding, you can be vague. Tell the funder where the funding will help and how they're directly solving that big picture problem with your organization. As one of several thousand nonprofits, you have the challenges of convincing this potential funder that your organization, program, or project should be funded by their foundation. To recap story structure, remember to start with a description of your organization, address the big picture problem that your organization is solving, define how they are solving the problem, include statistical information that shows your organization's progression towards solving this problem, and finally conclude with that ask. Finally, remember to relax. To help you with this, practice and edit your speech as often as you can. Practice with your family. If they don't understand your organization, program, or project after hearing your elevator pitch, you know that it needs some tweaking. To test this, just ask them to pitch it back to you. Then you will find the elements that they grasped and the ones that they did not, and you can edit your pitch from there. Your audience won't grab every concept the first time they hear it, but you want the important components to resonate. After this webinar, I'll send you a follow-up email with a recording of today's presentation, along with additional resources to assist you in developing your elevator pitch. Now, without further ado, I would like to welcome Crystal Langholz, Chief Operating Officer at First Nations Owista Corporation and former Executive Director of Hunkpahty Investments, and Linnell Smith, Programs Manager at First Nations Owista Corporation, and former Executive Director of Navajo Partnership for Housing. The first question I'd like to ask is, how do you conduct your ask?
So thanks, Stephanie. That was really great about the elevator speech. So for me, the only thing that really makes me feel comfortable with going for the ask is if I've really done the research into the organization before I talk with them. And obviously, like in a place like OSN or whatever, you know, you catch somebody in an elevator, you want to be able to grab them quickly and have a good sense of, you know, those things already if you can. So, you know, going in prepared so that you really can answer that question with the ask of how could this help me for real is good, and knowing where their funding priorities and where your programs sort of line up is really the key to being able to do that well. I would also say that I hear a lot of the time from organizations that we work with, and I felt this way myself, this insane sort of feeling really awkward asking for money, right? That it just feels terrible. And in fact, I was talking with an executive director of one of our Native CDFIs recently, and she just said, you know, point blank, like, you know, she's like, as a Native woman, it feels terrible to be in the position where I have to be begging, right? I just found that really compelling, and I think that's an issue that a lot of us face when we do the ask. So the thing I always do right before I'm about to do the ask, you know, I kind of like start to sweat and get awkward, and then I think to myself, my community worth this. Like I would literally think every single time, like when I was at Humpati, I think of Crow Creek, I think of our clients that we serve, and then you feel that moment where you're like, it is, like, this is worth it, like this is worth my pride, this is worth whatever I need to do. And then what comes from you then is going to be your most genuine. It's going to be your most genuine place of telling your story well. And so I think you find that space in you, and you find that compulsion that knows that in your heart, and then that's where it comes from. And if it comes from your heart, it's always going to be the right thing to say. And now, you know, with Owista, you know, you go to that place where you really believe in what you do, and you believe in all the, you know, our 520 certified BNC trainers and the impact they're making in their communities, and that's what you're telling your story right there. So, yeah, so that's what I do when I'm about to go for the ask. I mean, you do the good research, and you go in, and you really find that space where you believe in what you're doing, and you find that moment, and then you just do it. And you have to be okay with the fact that sometimes people will say no or look at you like that's weird. But a lot of times people will say yes, or be interested in what you have to say about your community. So that's my advice around that.
That's awesome. That's really similar to kind of my experiences. This is Linnell Smith, and I used to run a Native CDFI called Navajo Partnership for Housing. And a lot of the information that Stephanie shared regarding the elevator pitch is really going to be part of your ask. It's just going to be a lot more expanded as far as those bits and pieces. So way back in the day when I was new to the whole Native CDFI world, and I wish I had the experience that I have now, because then I think I would have framed my ask a little differently. But we all learn from our past mistakes and experiences, and which makes us better. So hopefully what we're sharing with you is going to be helpful. So when we, of course, were interested in an organization for possible funding, we did exactly what Crystal did. We did our research. We found out, does our mission fall in line with their priorities and maybe what their mission is, and is this really a potential funder that we're looking at? One of the things, our homework too, was to make sure that we had all of our information in order so that we could make the ask. And one of our most important tools was really our strategic business plan. Mm-hmm. And that really outlined what we were going to be doing for the next 5 years as far as programs, services, lending capital. So it really defined how much money did we need and who could we ask for these specific line items. So that was probably our most important tool, and that's going to be a lot of pre-planning. You have to put some work in before you actually make the ask so that you know what you're going to be doing in the next 5 years, 3 to 5 years. And so it incorporated the big picture model. So what are we going to do? What does my organization do? How are we going to have that impact? And how are we really going to do this? So it really supports that ask. Another thing was really the relationship with the funder. One of the worst things you could probably do, and this is really with foundations, is to kind of just cold call. And it's really important to build a relationship, because once they know the organization, they know what you're doing, they know what your organization believes in, it makes it a lot easier to create that buy-in with that funder. And a good point that Crystal brought up was that as natives, it is really hard to make that ask for money, because you do tend to have that sense of, I'm begging for money. But she made a really good point about really putting back into your mindset that this is not for you personally. This is really for the community that you're serving. So it really ties in. One of the most important things, I think, is really having that story to be told. How is your organization impacting these individual community members and creating good in the livelihood of that community?
Awesome. Thank you so much for those examples. The next question I have is 3-part. First is, do you have any successful funding stories? And what did you do to solidify this funding? And was there any unique thing that you said during your ask?
Sure. So yeah, I can think of a specific instance. When I was first starting out, someone told me once that when you want to do an ask, that the relationship is the most important part, right? So you basically just have to show up. Like if you find a way of being in that person's area, do it. So so this has created for me what I consider the where you try to create opportunities that are on accident. So I remember once I literally drove 8 hours to go see a funder, and had sent them and basically said, oh, I'm just in your neighborhood, your neck of the woods, as if rural South Dakota was a really easy place to get places from. And can I come by? Can I come by? And I had sent them an email like the previous week just saying, oh, I think I'm going to be in your neck of the woods. Can I swing by? And so I just happened to swing by with our strategic plan, right? And having done quite a bit of research on the funder, and really was able to say, these are the areas of our strategic plan that I know that you guys are really interested in. That really, and yeah, that created a long-term. That was the foundation for a really, really long-term partnership between that foundation and our and Hupati at the time, which was great. And I also, one thing that helped with that was that I had I knew other people that had used that foundation as a resource, and so I was able to name drop in a very nice way, be like, oh, yes, we're very close with this, this organization that funds, that you've also funded, and oh yes, I love her too, she's so great. And I think that helped with facilitating building an actual real relationship, and that I wasn't just a stranger off the street, I was so-and-so's friend that they trusted. So yeah, that's always awkward, especially for those of you who have limited budgets and maybe aren't able to fly around the country to go ask foundations for support. But if you're willing to do an 8-hour road trip after doing some research, that's a great way to do that. And I think Linnell's completely right that the strategic plan is your biggest tool on that.
Okay, well, I do have a successful funding story, and like Crystal said, it's kind of those planned by accident or accident by planning, or however you said it. But one of the things too that when you're a nonprofit, sometimes you get requests to present at conferences, sit on panels, or even just attend conferences. one good thing that we used to do was actually look through who would be a participant or a presenter at that same conference and kind of make the plan to bump into them or casually start talking with them, things like that. So I was very strategic about what conferences I would present at. So I would see if there was somebody that I would be able to meet with and potentially develop a relationship so that we could eventually make that ask. So there was a conference in Southern California. We decided there was going to be several foundations there, several opportunities for funding. We decided to go ahead and accept the request to sit on a panel, and it was really talking about our organization, how we work in our Native community. So it was kind of best practices and our success stories. So one of the pieces of our story in that presentation was probably the most impactful in getting us additional funding from a foundation. It was a significant amount of funding for unrestricted money. So that's like the best kind of money that you want, because then you can pretty much use it wherever you need to use it. So I think storytelling is going to be a really big part of your ask. And unfortunately for me, storytelling is not my forte like Stephanie. It takes me a while. I have to do a lot of preparation, get my facts, and then kind of create the heartfelt message behind it. So that was my homework, to make sure that you really want to tell people what you're doing in your community, but and really why you're doing it, and what are the long-term effects of them providing capital or operational money so that you can keep doing these really great things. And we had pictures in our presentation while we were telling this story, so it really brought that human touch to why we do what we do. So we ended up getting a 5-year unrestricted grant with this foundation. So that was probably our most successful, and it was really through effective storytelling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would also just say that if there are other ways for you to have your clients tell your story, or even your board members to tell your story, that's really powerful. You know, then this is in opportunities that you kind of can create that space a little bit more. But you know, if you can have someone standing next to you that's gotten a loan from you, or is going to, you know, is a member of your community that really is going to be feeling the effects, you know, they're one of the people that you gave a house to, right? That is going to be one of the best ways of, you know, and then you don't even have to fully tell your story, right? Because they're telling theirs, and that's the most compelling thing. And if not, it's really good to really have that person in mind. Our executive director, Crystal Cornelius, every single time she talks with a funder, she has this story about one of the clients that she saw in the grocery store that came up and told her about how her CFI had changed lives, and like that's always just that's the song in her heart, right? About why she does what she does. And so that story always comes out, and that's the success story that always comes out. And so whatever that story is for you, whether it's a person, you know, you can bring that person, or you know that story well, and that's the song in your heart. I think having that success story specifically too ready to go can be really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your answers. Next, I'd like to open the floor up. Does anyone have any questions? You can use the chat feature, or if you'd like to raise your hand, we can unmute you. And in the meantime, well, if anyone's typing a question, I just have one quick question. Do either of you ladies bring any marketing materials with you on your ask?
All the time. It's really important to show them some information about, you can talk, but a lot of times people don't retain absolutely everything that you're sharing with them. So it's good to have that information, whether it be in a strategic plan, or if you have maybe an annual report for your organization, that would be helpful. And at the bare minimum, your brochure for the organization.
Right. Yes. I mean, and you want to have your business card too. just, I can't tell you how many times I've been in an actual elevator with somebody and wanted to go for a business card and been like, oh, bummer. So that's a good one. But yeah, Linnell's definitely right that the annual reports, because and I think, really it's okay. You could have kind of a less is more model and have just a couple things. That's all right. But just make sure that whatever you do have is really good quality. So I mean, if that tool is going to be the annual report for you, make sure that looks good and communicates well what you're trying to communicate. Or if it's a strategic plan, make sure that looks good and is ready to go. A lot of random things that have just really text heavy or don't, aren't very visually appealing. It's better to have less that's well prepared than a lot that's not.
Well, thank you. So it looks like we don't have any questions out right now. Do either of you ladies have any last comments?
No, but just if does anyone else have any advice? I know that there's a couple people I'm seeing here on this who are pretty experienced people at this in their own right. So if you have any other thoughts, feel free to type those or raise your hand to share those stories as well. And if not, please know Linnell and I, as well as the rest of the team at OESTA, are here to support you, and we would love to listen to your elevator speech and give you our comments and thoughts. We're always ready for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you, ladies, for joining me today and for giving such great answers and insight into the Native CDFI realm. Stay tuned for our upcoming webinar. Our next webinar will be November 24th at 1 p.m. Mountain Time for our listening session, Native Convening Feedback. Voice your thoughts on this year's Native Convening. More information can be found at our website. And also remember, you can always follow us, keep up to date on the latest in the Native CDFI industry on Facebook, Twitter, and through our monthly newsletter. So thank you all for joining us. And if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to reach out to us and look out for my follow-up email. Thank you.